Hey guys, Chris here. Right behind me we have the 2019 Audi A6 Avant 45 TDI Quattro S-Line exterior, S-Line interior package, and in this video I'm going to give you guys my first impressions of this vehicle. So as you can hear in the background, it is running because it is cold as a mofo outside. We just arrived here in Bergen last night, actually in the middle of the night, because there was some crazy weather and construction work, and yeah, the roads were closed and stuff like that, and I wasn't able to give you guys my first impressions video yesterday. That's why I'm giving it to you now. So this really won't be my first impressions, but I will talk about my drive over the mountains to Bergen yesterday. But first off, let's just take a look at the exterior color. This is a black metallic paint color, and I haven't sent over the spec sheet yet, so I don't have the proper specs of this car, but it has the S-Line exterior package. As you see from this front fascia, it has the matrix LED headlights, and it has these wheels here, these multi-spoke, and they are, how big are these? These are 19s, 245 45 19s, Nokian Hakkapeliitta R tires, which are the choice of winter tires here in Norway. And as you can see, this also has the S-Line adaptive suspension, so it sits a bit lower than a normal car. And to the back here, it is the 45 TDI Quattro, which is the 3-liter V6 turbo diesel with 231 horsepower and a bunch of torque, 8-speed, 8-speed ZF transmission. Take a look quickly inside. This has the S-Line, interior package. Just turn down the music. You have these S-Line seats, which are part Alcantara, part leather, and they are this gray color. I think that this is called Fjord Gray. Oh, yes, and it is warm and nice in here. Just gonna turn down the music. We have the S-Line sports steering wheel. This has the faux leather top of the dashboard, also the top of the doors with the contrast stitching. But I will, give you guys a more in-depth video of this car on the interior and on the exterior quickly. Virtual cockpit and touch MMI infotainment system, the automatic transmission there. So let's take this car on the road, and I'll talk a bit about how it drives and my first impressions of this car now, having it for half a day. As I said in the beginning of the video, we drove from Oslo to Bergen yesterday, an 8-hour drive, about 500 kilometers, crossing a mountain pass in the Scandinavian Alps, which separates western and eastern Norway, 1,200 meters, 3,500 feet, minus 17 degrees Celsius at the coldest, and a lot of snow. And this car with this Quattro all-wheel drive, and those winters, those snowish conditions weren't a problem at all. This car just felt so confident on on snow, on ice, and in the cold. It just felt solid as a bank vault, just really confidence inspiring. But we didn't arrive before very late at night, because the few hours before Bergen there are a lot of tunnels, meaning a lot of maintenance work at night. Just gonna flip the camera a bit like that. A lot of maintenance work at night and closed tunnels. So we were stopped at one of the tunnels about an hour from Bergen, and we're told we had to wait 2 hours, or we could take a detour, which was 1.5 hours, and through some really tight, twisty, crazy roads, and that's what we did. So I really got to test this car on very many different types of roads, but I'll get a bit back to that later. But it felt very confident. But the steering is something I want to talk about in this car. But sitting here at a red light, at a stoplight, you hear this 3-liter V6 diesel, this 45 TDI, which is basically the same engine I had in that Q8 I drove back in December. That was a 50 TDI, so 286 horsepower instead of 231 horsepower, as this engine has. And why does my camera keep moving around? That is very annoying and very unprofessional. Give me a sec. So as I was saying, the 45 TDI engine in this car, it's much more audible. I don't think it's as refined as it was in that Q8. In that Q8, it was just a distant rumble, and yeah, basically, the same refinement sounds, the same NVH, just more pronounced in this car. But that means it's just on par with the BMW 530D in this car, and it's much more subdued, much more quiet in that Q8, which is very impressive. But you know, the power is nice, and it is a V6 diesel, so it is refined enough. But I was just hoping for a bit more refinement, and you know, getting into it, especially when it was cold, was just a bit disappointing. Now to the steering. So this car has active steering, 4-wheel steer, I think it's called. I don't have the spec sheet yet. They haven't sent over the spec sheet, so I don't have, you know, all the bits and bobs. But this has 4-wheel steer, and here in the city, it's such a treat because this is a big car. You know, the A6 in this, what is this? The C7, the C8, the 8th generation, I think, or yeah, I think it's the 8th generation. This car is big, it's wide, it's long, and having, you know, that 4-wheel steer really helps, you know, maneuvering tight spaces. And from lock to lock, it's like 2.5 turns. It's just a joy to use in the city. And also on those twisty roads, those small twisty roads on our detour yesterday, it was a pleasure to use, just really confidence inspiring. But the trade-off is, when I drove it, you know, at higher speeds, you know, on crossing the mountain yesterday, it has zero feel. I mean, zero feedback. It's really nicely weighted, and if you don't push the limits, it feels nice. But that is feel with, you know, feel in that manner, because it really isn't feel. It's just weighting and how it's programmed. When the front end loses grip, you don't feel anything through the steering wheel at all. And because this has rear wheel steer, at higher speeds, it turns with the car, giving it more stability. But that just means when you think you're gonna lose grip, you don't do it the second because you feel the car pivoting. You don't feel anything through the steering, but on ice you feel the car pivoting. But it just does that with a slight delay because the 4-wheel steer is doing its thing. So in that manner, it wasn't very predictable and not very confidence inspiring at the limit. And also, it's very sharp, it's very darty, but it has a numbness, so it's really hard to be precise on, you know, when it gets slippery at higher speeds. I found it really hard to, you know, just to modulate steering into a turn to get the amount I wanted. This car has the adaptive S-line suspension. I'm pretty sure about that. I think it's the same suspension I drove in that 50 TDI A6 sedan I drove back in the autumn. And that means this car is a bit lower than a normal A6, and it's a bit stiffer. Though having adaptive suspension, you have comfort, you have dynamic mode. What other modes do you have? You have, let's see, you have efficiency, comfort, auto, dynamic, and individual. I like it in comfort, the softest setting. And though it is, you know, a bit stiffer than, well, say the 530D I drove, and maybe even that V90, it does feel a bit more sporty and just hugs the road. It's not uncomfortable at all. It's just a bit stiffer, but it's really nicely dampened. And then over to this car's maybe its best strong suit, and that is the noise levels at motorway speeds. This is one quiet machine here, 90 kilometers an hour, which is above the speed limit. Don't tell anybody. Double pane laminated glass, these 19-inch wheels, 245mm wide tires. It's really, really quiet. Though I do think the 530D just edges it out. I think this sits in between the V90 and the 530D. And then we have this interior. This interior is as solid as it gets. It's bank vault solid. It's almost in its feel, fit and finish, and operation almost Bentley-esque. Because, well, Bentley's base a lot of, well, the new GT, Continental GT, is based on a lot of this tech and a lot of this switchgear, just, you know, upped even that small bit. But it just feels very solid. The driving experience is just really, really solid in this car. You can't fault it. But what we're sitting with on the other end, though this has, you know, I think this is called Fjord Gray, this interior color, which is really nice. You have a lot of, you know, nice metal accents, brushed aluminum and stuff like that, which brightens up the interior. I do think it just feels a bit cold and clinical in here. A dash of wood would, you know, would be very, very welcome. But it's nothing faulting this interior though. It has a few hard touch plastics in places you don't find in the competitors. The BMW, the E-classes, the S90, V90s don't have hard touch plastics in their cabinet at all. So that's a bit strange, but that has somewhat been of an Audi trend of late, is to cheapen some of their interior materials. If you see in the A1 reviews of late, you'll see that the top of the doors are hard touch plastics, which is really, really surprising. But otherwise than that, the interior is just so solid. It feels bank-wall solid, and I really, really like it. So that is basically my first impressions of this car. The first 12 or 14 hours of driving this car, the first day of it. And it's a car I really do like, though I would probably get it with the adaptive non-S-line suspension, you know, to have it a bit softer, especially here in the city of Bergen, which has terrible, terrible, terrible roads. It's really nice to have suspension that's just a bit softer. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, as always guys, please subscribe. See you guys later, and goodbye.